Welcome to the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. Please visit us at liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast for more information on living better and retiring well overseas. Hello, I'm Kathleen Petticord.
And I'm Leif Simon.
Welcome to a new episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. Yesterday, at this week's Retire Overseas virtual conference, Leif and I convened a panel to discuss options around the world today for residency. It was one of a series of 6 panel discussions that kind of form the foundation of this week's Retire Overseas virtual conference, addressing each of the 6 big categories that you need to address no matter where in the world you're thinking of going. So taxes, budgeting, healthcare, administration.
You always forget administration.
I think that's not coincidental. And residency. But the big starting point question for residency, and I thought that we could talk about this today, is do you actually need to go through the process, the time, the expense at all?
Right. If you're moving to another country, is it full-time or part-time? If it's part-time, you don't need residency, legal residency necessarily. It could still be a benefit even if you're going to be there part-time. And the one thing is that you could go back and forth. So right now with the COVID lockdown, if we have friends who are resident of Panama and they're back in the States for grandbabies that were born, and they were able to get back to the States because of their U.S. citizenship, and they'll be able to get back to Panama because they're Panamanian residency, even though Panama is still technically closed, I think, until October 12th, and that keeps getting pushed out. So do you need residency or not? If you're going to be there part-time, maybe not. Mexico allows you 180 days. On a tourist visa. Other countries allow you 90 days, and you can usually renew that at least once to get 180 days once you're in the country. And so snowbirds, part-timers, people moving around.
Digital nomads.
Right.
You can move from one place to another as long as the tourist stay allows.
Exactly. And I don't think they call themselves digital nomads, but that's how Paul and Vicky Terhorst have done their retirement for the last 35 years.
Perpetual retirees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They haven't had legal residency in any country since they left Argentina about 30 years ago. And they just move around based off of the tourism visa.
So residency, going through the process, does give you some sense of security. As the old saying goes, home is where when you show up and knock on the door, they have to let you in. And that's what a residency amounts to. It becomes your home country, and you'll be able to come and go securely with confidence. However, on the other hand, there is a cost, a real cost, and then a cost of time in establishing residency, and it is an administrative process, which is not my favorite thing. So you really want to weigh the pros and cons. What are the benefits and advantages for you in your situation, given your agendas and your ideas about what you want your new life overseas to look like? Is it worth the investment of time and money? Because the cost, depending on the country, can be several thousands of dollars.
Right. In some countries, you can really go through the process yourself. You don't need an attorney. Our friend Lee Harrison has done his residency permits in 5 or 6 countries at this point, all on his own. But he speaks Spanish. He taught himself Spanish before he first moved overseas 20 years ago, and so he can go through the process directly with the staff.
And Lee is retired, and he sees it as kind of a hobby, I think, these little projects, like establishing a new residency.
But some countries are easier than others, and you may not even need to know the local language. Mexico, again, is another good one. You can do the process at a consulate in the U.S., and the consulate officers will speak English, so the whole process can be done in English with regard to Mexico. Right. Colombia's process is fairly straightforward, not a lot of bureaucracy or paperwork, and so you could probably do that even if you don't speak Spanish greatly. In the case of Panama, there are certain documents that have to be signed off on by an attorney, and unfortunately no attorney is going to sign off on those documents unless you use them for the entire process. And so but attorney's fees aren't the only fees. There are government fees as well. Again, Colombia, both attorney's fees, if you use an attorney, and the government fees are fairly low. Other countries, just the country fees for the residency application can be a few $1,000s. Right. And that's one thing that has kept retirees over the years from applying for legal residency. Thailand's a good example,
right?
Where they would do the border run, and every 90 days they would just go over the border to Laos or Cambodia or whatever.
And it was very common in Panama and Costa Rica as well, back and forth across that border.
But countries are cracking down more on that, and there is a cost to doing that every 90 days of traveling, hotel night, if you've got to be out of the country for a night. But in Thailand, it developed so much that there were service providers that would just collect a bunch of expat passports and run them over the border. But Thailand's clamped down on that at this point as well. But unfortunately, in Thailand, it's a 1-year renewable visa if you're a retiree. So you've got to go through the process every year. So depending on where you're going, you need to understand what the process is and what qualifies you and how to maintain that.
So that's a great segue into the next point I wanted to cover, which is the broad strokes of your options for establishing residency. And then they speak directly to what the process looks like, how long it takes, what's required, and what it costs.
Right.
And so there are two big categories, an income residency option or an investment residency option. And what would be the difference?
Right. So for the income option, it's basically showing that you can take care of yourself, pay for your bills once you move to the country. We talk about it in terms in Central America, especially Latin America, as a pensionado visa. That literally means a retiree visa. And most pensionado visas require you to be receiving a pension, which for Americans would be Social Security or a state or government pension, or if you're lucky enough to have a company pension still. That would be the way to qualify for those. Some countries have also a rentista visa, which is just passive income, so income from not working, you can include interest, dividends, and rent. In Europe, they make no distinction. So you just need so much money to qualify, whether it's coming from pensions and or investment income, it could be fine. On the investment side, again, there's a lot of different options over the course of the different countries. The biggest one is real estate. There are golden visas in Europe, and there you make the investment and you get residency. So for a golden visa, you invest what's required in one or more properties, and you get a residency permit. Panama has that option, although it's not the best option right now, and Colombia and others. And then there are other investment options of starting a business or investing in local government bonds, local bank CDs, and even local companies.
Okay. All right. And so once you've chosen which path you want to follow, and it can play a role in choosing the country, because you may have a short list of 2 or 3 countries that you're interested in, and then you look at the residency options and find that one of those countries doesn't actually offer an option you qualify for example. And so it can play a role in determining where you go. So you've chosen your country and your path to residency. And to do that, to choose that path to residency, what you're going to look at is what's required to qualify, but also what's required to maintain the status.
Right. If you're not moving there full time, it's if you're going to be, again, part-time residents getting actual legal residency, or if you want to use it as a backup residency plan, just as a place that you can go to should there be another pandemic. Then how long do you need to be in the country to maintain that residency permit? Even if you are planning on moving there full time. Ecuador, for example, requires you in the first 2 years to not be out of the country for more than 90 days each year.
And that's kind of a big restriction.
It is, especially usually in your first year of moving to a new place. You're going to be going back and forth to finish up details from wherever you came from. In most cases, some people are ready to go and they're set and happy to be in their new home full time permanently. Other countries have, like the Belize QRP program, requires you to be in the country only 30 days a year. So that's an easy one. Portugal is an interesting example. If you go through the income route in Portugal, you need to be in the country 183 days or more. If you go the investment route through the Golden Visa, you effectively need to be in the country 1 week a year.
Right, which is a very low threshold. That's a very friendly option. All right, then 2 other points to consider when choosing your residency. Not that, well, in some cases these could be driving points, but for the most part they're not. But things to remember: will your residency status allow you to work, for example? And maybe that's important to you or not, including in your own business. sometimes.
Right. Under the Belize QRP program, you're not allowed to work at all, even in your own business. You can have a business in Belize, and you can wave to it as you drive by, and wave
to the people running it for you.
To the people running it for you, to your workers. But they've been clamping down on that in Belize in the last few years. Yeah. That you're not even allowed to work in your own business. So, so maybe QRP isn't the right program for you. There is another option in Belize. So you want to understand what those requirements are.
Exactly. It makes the point that you want to think through or investigate all the aspects of the residency, because you wouldn't want to go through the whole process of establishing QRP residency in Belize because you want to move to Belize to start a business, only to find after you've invested the time and money, oh, wait, I've got my residency, but it disallows me doing what I wanted to do in the first place.
Right.
And then the other final point I think is important to keep in mind in some cases, depending on your situation, is will your path to residency allow you to acquire citizenship, to naturalize and acquire a second passport?
And most will, but some of the pensionado programs in Central America don't. And so, again, ask the question. Also, how the timeline plays out. So for years in Panama, the first attorney in Panama that we worked with would tell me that you only need 5 years of residency in Panama before you're eligible for naturalization. Well, in a way, she was right, but she was mostly wrong. You need 5 years of permanent residency in Panama before you're eligible for naturalization. Mm-hmm. And you don't get permanent residency from day one on most of the residency permits that you can get in Panama. So you had to go through 3 to 5 years of temporary residency before you got permanent residency, and then after 5 years of permanent. So it was more like an 8 to 10 year process.
Which is a long timeline.
Right. So you want to understand what the true requirements are and which residency option will be best for that. Now, currently with Panama, the Friendly Nations visa, that is permanent from the first approval. And so anybody who's gotten the Friendly Nations permit can apply for naturalization after just 5 years of residency.
And the Friendly Nations visa also allows you to work.
It allows you to get a work permit. Yeah.
Right.
It's not automatic. Some countries it is automatic. You get residency, you can work. Ecuador, Dominican Republic are two that it's once you have the legal residency, you're able to work.
Okay. Well, I hope that provides you with a broad overview and some context as you think through your options for moving overseas. If you're thinking of moving indefinitely, if you want to be able to live full-time in the country, or if you want to be able to come and go as you like, not counting days, not worrying about restrictions, this residency question is important. And I hope that our conversation today gives you a starting point, at least, to think through how this works for you, depending on where you want to go in the world. Thank you for listening. We'll be in touch again soon.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. For more, please visit liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast, where you'll find lots more information and resources to help you live better and retire well overseas.